Hello and welcome to the Fruugo and Expandedly GPSR webinar. My name is, hi Drew. So my name is Kelly McNamara. I am the Head of Account Management at Fruugo.com. I'm very pleased to be joined today by Drew Cooper, who is Head of Sales at Expandedly, the global e-commerce experts. So today we'll be discussing the hot topic for international e-commerce retailers selling into the EU, GPSR, the General Product Safety Regulations, which come into effect in December this year. So today we've got the Head of Compliance from Expandedly at hand if you wish to ask any questions during this webinar, and I will pick up any questions where possible. We're also having a questions and answer sessions at the end. If you've got any questions, you can ask them at the end. If we can't answer, we'll follow up with a few questions. We can follow up after the webinar. But yeah, please feel free to ask during the session, and we'll pick them up wherever we can. So Drew, do you want to introduce yourself? I really appreciate you joining me today.
No worries. Good to see you again, Kelly. Welcome. Good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody who's joined us. Delighted to be here. And quick intro. So Drew Cooper, Head of Sales at Expandedly, and I work with an awesome team of people to support international sellers expand into the UK and Europe, multitude of services. And today we're picking the one which is hot topic at the minute, which is compliance, and particularly that product compliance. So hopefully we can overcome some of your questions and concerns regarding specifically the general product safety regulation, as Kelly mentioned, but also going to touch on some other bits of compliance as well to hopefully help you along the way. So thank you. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Drew. So we're going to cover various different aspects of GPSR today. Starting off with product compliance, the different types of product compliance, including GPSR. So we'll be giving you an overview of that. We'll also talk about the different types of regulations and give you examples of the different types of regulations. We will be also covering new changes for GPSR, as well as some disruptive market misconceptions, the online marketplace responsibilities, and then we'll finalise with some key takeaways and also then a question and answer session.
Fantastic. So we're just going to kick off with a bit of text here, which is description of what product compliance is. So it might sound quite obvious. However, the GPSR regulation coming into super force in December this year, and other project regulations are sort of encompassed by a couple of statements, really. So product compliance in the UK and EU, it refers to the adherence of products to regulatory standards and requirements established by authorities to ensure the safety, health and environmental impact of those products. So compliance is crucial to protect consumers, promote fair competition and meet legal obligations. Now, I think particularly that statement you would have all have experienced sometime throughout your e-commerce sales journey. Certainly those that middle one at the end, so promoting fair competition and having products put on the market that are non-compliant and subsequently have the ability to be able to undercut pricing and maybe get to some pricing elements that you can't meet due to the complexity of you having your products compliant. So, and then in simple terms, the product compliance in the UK and EU means making sure that your products follow the rules and standards set by authorities to keep people safe and protect the environment. And it's like a set of guidelines to ensure that when you buy something, it's not going to harm you or the planet. So the GPSR essentially sets the rules for product compliance. It's the baseline that all products now have to conform to. And then, as we're going to talk about in a minute, there's some other product categories which sort of supersede it, depending on what you're selling. But you should look at GPSR as the must for anything that's now being sold in the UK and Europe. So when we're talking about regulations, we've got the general product one, which, as I mentioned, is sort of the baseline. Now, some of you on here may be interested in the general product safety regulation. However, your products may not fall into that category. you may be selling, some examples we've got here are food, cosmetics, or medical devices, and we've got some others in a minute, which have their own regulations. However, they do encompass the GPSR piece in it. So it's not that you have to have your general product regulation, plus you need to, follow that, plus the, your regulation for your food, okay, because it will encompass elements of that that are required. So I've put some examples here of some other elements which you may fall into. And as we talk through this, go through this webinar, some stuff surrounding what's required in each of these will come clear. However, we've got food and what parts of the regulation are appropriate and what's required. We've got the cosmetic element of it, and we've got medical devices, which are all a higher risk element than the general product category. We've also got electrical to CE mark products, which encompasses both electrical, as you probably know, and toys and children's items. And then we've got some chemical elements, which, of course, are higher risk and require quite substantial regulatory requirements in order for them to be tested appropriately and to conform. And we've got the pet food, food supplements, and organic. So this is pretty much all of the categories, apart from real nuanced ones where your products are likely to fit, and the differences in what's required for those. And as I mentioned, the reason why I wanted to illustrate this is just for purposes that if you haven't had to conform previously, i.e. your product was a general product and you didn't have to do anything with your product in order for it to be compliant, then now you have to. And if you have products that's outside of general product regulation and you were making them compliant, then you're okay. So the GPSR changes. So these are the key areas that are changing and coming into force on the 13th of December 2024. Just before I kick off on this bit, the general product regulation has been around for a long time. So you would have no doubt heard about it. However, very little enforcement, and those recommendations from the general product regulation, few actually adhere to them unless they're manufactured in the UK or EU typically. But the manufacturers outside of that, the adherence was very, very low. So now it's being enforced. These are the key areas. So as I mentioned, comes into force on the 13th of December. It's all non-food related products required. It's to focus on the safety of products, whereas previously that was almost non-existent. There are additional information required in order to be compliant, which we'll come on to shortly. It's about ensuring that the manufacturing processes are documented and you have the right documents for them to order you to have a responsible person, again, which we'll touch on in a minute. So you need somebody in region to support with that. And of course, there's now some ownership, which is what Kelly's going to dive into a little bit later on, is about the requirement for online marketplaces to adhere and to put some steps in to make sure that their sellers on the platform are adhering. They're not slipping through the net, for a better way of putting it.
So, Drew, we've got a couple of questions so far. We've got a question as to why we're rolling it out in December. But I guess, it's not the online marketplaces that are rolling this out. It's the EU legislation. And therefore, it's something that we all have to do and comply with. Is there anything that you want to kind of add to that?
No, I think why December? I'm not entirely sure I can answer why they chose that. However, of course, everything's got to have essentially a start date. In question here, I think surrounding GB and EU. So despite our split from the European Union, we're talking about Europe. Now we're still in Europe, so we're not in the European Union. However, this does still apply. So the GB and EU, this requirement for general product safety regulation, we share it, essentially, so it's still applicable for both regions. Rob, I'm just taking a look at your question there quickly, because I think that's appropriate as well. But just bear with me 2 seconds just to read it.
So Aaron's asking, does this only apply to non-food products? And Yes, it obviously it applies to all products, but food have their own regulations, which Drew will go into as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And Aaron, that's right. Yes, so I think the question from Rob actually, we've wrapped up in that previous question, and Chris has just put something on there surrounding, is it required for UK and EU? The answer is yes. Awesome, great
Thank
stuff.
you.
Love it. Okay, so here, Aaron, look, great. This is the next slide. So if your product is a food or food supplement, then these rules do not apply. They have their own regulations solely, and the GPSR regulations are not required for your products. So whilst you still need to ensure, of course, that you're complying with that regulation surrounding your specific products, you don't need to, you can probably hop off now. If you like, but yeah, it doesn't apply to you, and you just need to ensure that you're following those guidelines.
Yeah, and just on that, Drew, although it doesn't apply to food, Fruugo will be still requiring food supplement retailers to ensure that all the relevant fields will be populated with contact details, you know, as well as sort of all the necessary safety information as well, which we can touch on further on. So we will be requiring such information to be submitted.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Okay, so with regards to safety information, so this is surrounding the actual requirements of submission or the accumulation and of documentation for general products. So just to give a high level example, if you were up till December importing the example I quite often give, is because it's one of the most basic forms, is a coaster that you use to put a cup on, made out of cork. Yeah, so totally low risk. It's soft. It's not going to hurt anyone. It doesn't have any composition requirements that are going to cause any damage. Before that, didn't have to have any documentation attached to it at all. So in terms of a risk assessment, it didn't need to have anything held with it. You could import it. You could have almost a non-existent label, and you could sell it in region with no dramas at all. The change now is, a relative of what you're selling, you need to have documentation proportionate to the product and the level of risk. So whilst a cork coaster still has the same outcome, if you were to, you know, throw it at somebody or chew on it, it's not going to cause you any damage. You still need to ensure that the manufacturer has followed an appropriate start to end journey for that product. So that's a real, a key takeaway here from the safety information of GPSR. Now, providing that the products are made in a reputable manufacturing plant, which is highly likely and probable in probably all cases, then this documentation will be available to them, and they'll be able to supply it to you. So this isn't about additional testing. It's not about additional information that's required. This is stuff that's typically available. In terms of documentation, what it's called. So one misconception or one contributing factor to people being confused with this is that documentation is called multiple different things. However, it's essentially the same document. So one thing which I'll really stress is, when you're going through this process, is don't get too hung up or confused with what the document's called. If it's a conforming document for the safety of the product, risk assessment, and it has similar wording to those in that purple box, and there's probably tens of other examples as well, then it's okay, providing, of course, it's it's a registered document. And then when you're choosing your responsible person, which we'll come on to in a minute, they will check this documentation against your compliant label and essentially sign it off for you. So don't get confused by different names and thinking that you have to have multiple documents. That's not the case. You only need one. And we can support through Fruugo on that to ensure that you're compliant on that front. Kelly, have you had any examples? I think we'll just stay on this slide just for one more second. Have you had any questions or concerns surrounding the documentation that's anticipated from people, like in terms of questions around what they actually need?
Not as far as I'm aware. There's not been a lot of communication or questions regarding that. I think a lot of retailers are more concerned as to how they're going to submit this information via Fruugo, and whether or not it actually applies for them. The declaration of conformity is not something that Fruugo sellers have really asked about, as far as I'm aware so far.
Okay, interesting. Well, yeah, and it's important to note as well that some of these documents are directly related to other product categories. I don't want to add confusion here, but things like declaration of conformity is specific to that. The wording is specific to CE marked products. So you may have heard it and thought, well, that's not applicable to the general product safety regulation. And that's not wrong, because that actual terminology may or may not be dependent on the document that you hold. So just get it checked out. No huge concern.
So we've got a question for clarity. A certificate of conformity or declaration of conformity is required for products regardless of whether they're regardless of whether it is required for CE marking. So are you saying the declaration of conformity is just for CE mark products?
So the wording is that terminology, so declaration of conformity and some of the others, is used commonly when we're talking about CE marked products. That is typically the wording that's used. You need, for CE marked products, you need to sign a declaration of conformity as the seller of the goods to essentially rubber stamp and prove that you're continuously working towards the compliance of that product to ensure its safety throughout its journey, throughout the time you're selling it. So that's the word. However, the declaration of conformity may be the document that's appropriate for your general product as well. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that there's different names for it. But essentially, if that's what you've got and that satisfies the compliance of that product, then that's okay. Yeah. If your document's called certificate of compliance, it doesn't mean that you also need a declaration of conformity, because it's the same risk assessment and declaration essentially.
So we've got a question, what certification do we provide as a reseller? So what do the resellers of these products actually need?
It's a great question. And the short answer is they need the same thing. So the example I'll give is if you're a reseller buying from wholesale, and you're purchasing them from your wholesale shop, then you as the end seller to consumer is responsible for ensuring that you conform. Okay, so ensuring that you are required to conform to the general product safety regulation. Now that will mean that you need to provide documentation, whether that's available from the manufacturer or whether that's available from the wholesaler, will be the discussion that will need to be had. The other option is example is if you're purchasing that from a distributor or purchasing it direct from the manufacturer of those products and reselling them, then that's a slightly easier transition because they will have that documentation, and they would have had it. The distributor would have had that documentation as a seller from the manufacturer, or whether they have it or they'll be able to get it and subsequently then pass that down to you. So nothing changes. It will just be how easy it is, I suppose, for you to be able to get to the next stage.
Okay. So we've got a question saying, if you purchase via a supplier, are they the responsible person?
So essentially, the short answer is no, they won't be, or they won't be the responsible person, because you're selling that product on. So you're the further down the chain essentially as they are. So whilst they'll have a requirement, if they're importing the goods into the UK and selling them, they'll have a responsibility to ensure that they've covered the GPSR regulation. But then essentially you're then moving that product on further. So whether you've got authority to use that responsible person, then great. If you haven't, then you'll need to go through the process and ensure you've got them yourselves.
Great. And we've also got a question about the certification. As a reseller of over 100 brands, will they need a certified declaration from each brand? But I guess the answer is yes, and they will need to get copies of all of these. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Product specific. Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
It's worth noting just on that, Kelly, that if we're talking about multiple products under the same category, for instance, variants. So if you have, I'll go back to the coaster example I gave. If the coaster comes in 20 different colors, essentially, then it will have you'll have one responsible person for covering multiple SKUs, and it will likely fall under the same set of documentation if it's just changing in one form or another.
Great, thank you, Drew.
All right. Okay, excellent. These questions are great. Keep them coming. So the additional information that's required is the manufacturer. And I think I saw a question come up a minute ago surrounding this about importer of record. So if you're the importer of the goods, that make you the manufacturer. So essentially, if you're putting the manufacturer, if you're putting it on the market, you'll be classed as a manufacturer. So you put your address on it. If you're based in the UK, yeah, so you're based in the UK and you put your name on it and you're selling in the UK, then you'll be manufacturer, but you can also represent yourself as a responsible person, which we're going to come on to in a minute. So there's no need for any external support or third-party support on that. It's if you're moving out of region is when you're going to be required to have some support on that. So I think this is Chris has just explained on the chat here. It's about, in order to demonstrate that internal processes are correct standard, there's an expectation for them to be audited and certified. So this is surrounding the manufacturing of the goods. So they're going to have some certification and an expectation of them to be audited. Now, whether that comes through a GMP or ISO accreditation, but there's also multiple other auditing companies that can take place all around the world. But the regulation now requires for them to have an internal process to meet the standards, essentially. So this is where this is going to come from. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, I don't think this, people need to be put off or concerned about this, because providing the goods aren't, made in a garage in the middle of nowhere where, they're made, put up in, a country where there's no management of that, then we're in a place now where this will be likely to be available. When you're purchasing goods, if you're having them made and you're white labeling them, or you're manufacturing themselves in the plant, then they will have this, and it just may be the terminology that's used in order for them to understand what you're requesting. Cool. So responsible person. So essentially, all products now sold, relative of product category, require physical representation in the country in which a product is being sold. So if you're based in the UK, selling in the UK, you need a UK responsible person. If you're selling in the EU, you need an EU responsible person. Just one for all of Europe, one for the UK. If you're based in either of those regions as a registered entity, excuse me, registered business entity, and have an address for your own product, you can represent yourself. Previously, this wasn't the case. For general products, you didn't need to have a responsible person. Multiple other product categories did. Some of those that we touched on earlier. The GPSR, no. So the key thing here is, if you're selling in the UK or Europe, you need to have a competent and confident either third party or yourself to represent you for those goods. If you're based outside of those regions and you haven't got a registered business entity with an address in the UK or EU, then you'll need to have a third party support you with that.
So we've got a question here, which is quite interesting, and one I've heard before. It's more related to the declaration of conformity, but where retailers carry more than 20,000 listings from more than 200 vendors, many of which who are not aware of GPSR until now, will they need to provide the declaration of conformity for each and every one of those products?
Sadly, yes. I mean, if you look at if we peel back what this regulation really is, which terminology we used at the beginning, what we're really doing here, or what the regulators are doing, is trying to remove non-compliant products for sale. Now, of course, that can only be good for anybody who's wishing to sell compliant products, because you're going to remove competition. You're going to remove, fight to the bottom in a pricing war. You're going to remove countless products being imported into the region that just aren't fit for purpose. All of those good things. Sadly, the other side of the coin is that because this has never reared its head before, however it's been there, that people that are selling compliant products but haven't had to comply, in inverted commas, or submit anything, have never even given it a thought. So it can be quite mind-boggling to think that I've got to find all this information now for hundreds or thousands of products. But it is a journey, and I really don't think that people should be too concerned about what that will look like, because when you start doing it, I really feel that it will be something which will be relatively straightforward. And if not, then we can certainly support with how you do that. So, we have some free consultancy on that front. So feel free to reach out. Don't be suffering silence, and certainly don't start to pull listings or anything like that before you've acknowledged it. Yeah, sorry, go on, Kelly.
Yeah, I was going to say, we've got a question. So we've got a retailer based in the US, and they have entities in the UK and the EU. So can those companies be their responsible agent?
Yeah, so this is if you've got a brand that's manufactured in Europe or manufactured in the UK, or they've got a distribution warehouse there or whatever, providing that they're happy to do that and that they're competent and confident in what they're doing, because this isn't about a tick box exercise, putting an address on the label, everybody's happy. This is about they really need to understand what they're doing and be able to present the regulators with the documentation, the evidence of a compliant product label to the regulators when requested. So short answer is absolutely. If you've got something, you've got the manufacturer there, they can help. If not, seek advice.
Great, thank you.
So one thing there, which is quite apt, actually, on the left-hand side, we've got the obligations to collect and store safety documents for 10 years. So this wasn't applicable for general products at all until recently. But that in itself is a big feat, really. We're talking about every product now. We've got to store those safety documentation for that particular product for 10 years of its journey and more if it's still being sold. That's quite a big task. So I just wanted, I thought it'd be appropriate to put this slide in. So this isn't related to GPSR. This is non-GPSR. But this is, I thought, just to give an example of what we're looking for here. So, so toys, there's certain testing that's required. This may be familiar with if you're selling toys. Medical devices, there's notified body testing. I mean, it's quite a rigorous task to get medical devices to be sold in the UK and EU. And then electrical products are self-certification through CE marked declaration of conformity, essentially. So, and if you're selling any other product outside of general products, which you may or may not know whether your product fitted into that or not, which again, seek some advice on that. But if you know and it's just under the GPSR regulation, you've never had to submit any documentation to any OMP or regulator for your product previously, then great, we can help, seek advice and tell you what to do. If you have, then you'll probably be aware of what's required, and that will give you definitely a leg up in understanding what's required for GPSR if needed. Okay, so process. So, excuse me, in order to be compliant, there's a couple of things that have to happen. The first thing is the product label requirement. So what is put on your label, or not in some cases, in order to be compliant. This is the first stage to understand whether your product conforms to the appropriate regulation. Now, what will happen in this instance is the product label will be reviewed by a compliance expert, and then they'll identify what information needs to be on the label, what information is already on there that needs to come off. I'll come back to that piece in a minute, or what information on it that needs to be amended. Now that will form the base of one, identifying what product category it falls into, which is of course critical, because if it's in general product, you've got lower requirements for the regulation, whereas if it falls into food supplements, you're going to have a slightly higher one. So yeah, it tells you where it falls, and then any amendments you need to make, or symbols that need to go on the label in order for it to be compliant. And then finally, let you know that you're going to need a responsible person if you haven't already got one on there. That report will then be delivered, and then those changes will be made. They can be made either by changing your label in its entirety, if that's an option for you. If you already have product manufactured or you're a reseller, then an over sticker, if required for information, is appropriate as well, or an insert. So this isn't about having to pull all your product out of the market, take it to a 3PL warehouse and relabel it, or take it all back home and relabel it, or send it back to the manufacturer. This is about the easiest way in order to change your label if needed, because it's not always the case. So this is an if it does, then make those amendments, and then you'll be good for sale. You put your address, you'll put your responsible person address on there, and then that product label is fit for purpose in region.
Yeah, I've had a question about this, Drew, in recent weeks from a retailer, small cosmetic items. They sell like lip liners and things like that. All of them have got like the barcodes and things on, but there's no room to attach any labels. So a question I had was, what are we supposed to do to comply? So in answer to that, it's they can put it in the packaging. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, so something I can envision what you're talking about. Not that I use it myself, Kelly.
Only today.
So what's quite common on items like that is if they come in a box, great. If they come in a thin cardboard box, brilliant, because you'll often find there's an insert that you pull out and it's an A3 sheet of paper with 40 different languages on it. Super common, cost effective. Does exactly what the regulation requires, and it's sufficient. And then they discard it when they don't need it, and then they've just got their item and it's aesthetically pleasing. The other option is, if it doesn't come in a box, is to do like a peel and reveal label. Or you may have seen it on the thing that's coming to my mind is wine bottles. Around the top they'll put like a sticker, and it sort of pokes out to the side. Generally promotional activity, but you can stick it on, and then you either peel it back, and then it's got multiple languages in it or multiple pieces of information in it. That's really common on smaller items where they can't fit it on their label, or they don't want to spoil the aesthetics of it, because you've got some products which the packaging is critical to sales, critical to commercial, the commercial sales and stuff like that. So spoiling that can often be quite off-putting. So there's various options on what you do with that. The other thing to mention as well, just surrounding claims. So this common mistake on wording. So often wording, if you're selling, example I use, if you're a US seller selling, maybe food supplements, or, it could be a general product, but the use of it, you're explaining it as in, I'll use this one here, healing back pain. It could just be a pad that you put on your chair to, like a lumbar support for your back, but you're presenting that, maybe by saying, well, it heals your back pain, then that can maybe change the use of the product in the UK and Europe. We're far more strict, I suppose the right words, on what usage of words we put on there. So it could change the parameters of the regulation. So it's really important to get that checked out as well. So you could put it from a general product, lower risk, to a medical device, high risk, within just by wording. We can change the words, you can manipulate them to be, to not fall into that category. I think it's important to know as well about translations. So we spoke about the requirement for UK responsible person and EU responsible person. The same rules apply for translation. So wherever you're selling your product, you need to have it, and storing and selling those goods, you need to have it translated into that language. Now, this is products, it's product specific, and in some cases country specific on what needs to be translated. So again, when you have the label review done, it will combat all of this amongst it. So it will tell you what requirements are needed from your label, also what you need to translate depending on where you're selling it, and it will educate on what needs to be translated. Hence why the requirement for an insert or peer and reveal label is appropriate. If you've got a big item which comes in a cardboard box, really easy to navigate. You can simply put in an A4 bit of paper, really cost effective, get it in there, it satisfies the regulation, multiple languages. The consumer can understand and read excuse me, what they need to understand the product, discard it if they wish, and then everyone's happy with that. But yeah, this is important. If you're selling all out of Europe, some countries have different interpretations of what needs to be translated. But again, no need to go right into the grassroots with this, because some third-party support, which is going to be needed in most cases, will be able to support you with this. Okay, so I know we've touched a little bit on responsible person. These are the key areas of what the responsibilities are. So as a responsible person, if you're based outside of that region, remember that they will provide you with a UK and or European address where the product's sold. Just to recap, EU responsible person is satisfactory for all of Europe. So relative of where they're based, Germany, France, Italy, they cover all of Europe. They help with the compliance checks, advice and guidance, which is clearly critical. Any product registrations that are required. General products at seller level, manufacturer level, don't need any product registrations, but Kelly's going to touch on her piece from an OMP in a minute, but no registrations required. If you have some other product categories and they may well need registrations, so the responsible person will help with that. They're certified with the accredited bodies, in most cases multiple bodies. That's really critical, that they're competent and confident. You can hear those words a couple more times today. They support with the correct documentation, and they can help with the creation of documents as well. So if you don't have them, there are some options about how you can create them or support your manufacturer to create them. So if you are struggling with what it looks like or where to get it, then seek some support. They store the documents, as I mentioned before, for 10 years for general products, and then any product recalls, they can help with that when it comes to from a regulatory perspective. It's joint responsibility, responsible person and seller. So we'll take some responsibility for the compliance of your product based on the advice given. So, and then, yes, just on the right there. So the due diligence stuff and the liaison between you, the consumer, if required, and the regulator, should there be any problems with the product, we'll step in and support you on that journey. Hopefully that never happens, of course. Great. So this is quite interesting. So whilst we're obviously here to discuss Fruugo in all its glory and how we can help the marketplace push forward with compliant products, you may or may not be aware that other marketplaces offered the responsible person service inside of their software. This happened, and it's been happening for a number of years. So where they would spearhead the GPSR regulation and represent their sellers' products themselves with almost zero due diligence and collation of documentation. And what's happened now is that, of course, the understanding of what they need to do and the requirements of a responsible person and the GPSR regulation have essentially made them pull out. So there is no OMP that I'm aware of anyway that's now offering this as a service, nor would I expect them to, because It's not their core service. Of course, they have an obligation to help, but actually offering this as a service is no longer available. So if you do have this for another OMP, for another marketplace, then certainly check out if they're still going to, support you up and past the 13th of December. I think the amendment piece at the bottom there. So it's quite possible that some of the products will require some level of rework. So whether that's the application of a responsible person address, whether it's a change in a label, whether it's an insert, it's worth having a look at that and seeing, if it's applicable for you to do so. Now, if product's already in the market and hasn't got a responsible person address on it, it's in the market before 13th of December, there is going to be some flexibility surrounding when those products need to be compliant. However, you need to have appointed a responsible person. So again, don't panic about, okay, I'm at word, I've got 10,000 units in a warehouse in Europe, or in my own facility, and I don't want to rework 10,000 units. Consider what that looks like for you personally in terms of reworking it. Cool. So these misconceptions. So I think we've covered a few of these. So I'm gonna rattle through these. But will any UK and EU address do the job? No. They need to be competent and confident, and able to support you with the job at hand. Is a responsible person just for addresses? No, it's not just a physical location. It's about the designated entity being responsible, ensuring the product is compliant. RP should be cheap. I mean, it involves, there are companies out there offering it for extremely low prices. Word of warning that there does involve legal and regulatory responsibilities that are beyond and are justifiable by price. So I think just do some research on that front. Find somebody that fits for you and can help you, and don't just go for the cheapest to get an address on there. If it's compliant in the US, is it compliant in the UK and EU? No, the regulatory standards differ between regions. They need to adhere to UK and EU regulations for market entry. So probably unlikely. No one really takes responsibility. Yeah, absolutely. We certainly Expandly take it very, very seriously. We invest a lot of resource and energy into making sure that we provide you with nothing but the best and up-to-date advice. No one's going to know. Previously, totally agree with that. Gone under the radar. Nobody really checked it. Too many products in the market, non-compliant. That would just be a complete minefield. However, now they will. It'll take the marketplace a while to find out. Not any longer, as Kelly's going to touch on in a minute. And UK sellers are safe. So just remember, if you're a UK seller, you can represent yourself. However, you still need to have the regulatory documentation. So if you are based in the UK, fantastic. Then you are in a strong place with that. If you choose not to appoint a third party to help you, just make sure you're reading the regulation and complying. Righto. Right, I'll pass it over now to Kelly.
Thank you, Drew. That was really, really helpful. So yeah, I'm just going to start by talking about the online marketplace obligations. So these are the things that Fruugo have and are and will be doing. So we have to register a single point of contact on the Safety Gate portal. This is something we already do. We get weekly RAPEX alerts, and this is something that we are looking to automate to deal with higher volumes. We also need to enable retailers to provide information on the manufacturer of the product, and also the EU responsible person if that manufacturer is outside of the EU. So I know we've got a question about Limworks and how if we're working with them to submit that information, but how we're handling this, I'll just kind of cover this. It's actually an upload functionality in the retailer portal. So we have some retailers that have tried and tested it already, and it is actually been made available to some retailers tomorrow. And if you have your responsible person and manufacturer's details there ready to upload, please reach out to me and I can get you set up on that. We haven't rolled it out to everybody at this stage, but it's there ready to go. So what we're looking for is you to either submit the details based on the brand or manufacturer name, and you will need to provide the manufacturer's name, address, contact details, and as well, if that is outside of the EU, we will need the responsible person's details as well. So again, I've got a template which you can see if you're not if you need that, just to be clear on what fields that you will be populating, if not soon, in the next couple of weeks. The other thing is to enable retailers provide minimum safety information onto the product page. We have to remove any products reported as unsafe within 2 working days. So again, this is something that will be available to upload into the portal. You can upload different safety warning informations for each of your SKUs. We'll communicate the actual requirements and the fields that you will need to submit in the due course. So the question about Limworks and other marketplaces, you don't have to worry about that at this stage. This is a simple solution in the portal, while other Limworks and other integration partners prepare to upload it via the feeds and APIs. So we'll have that functionality available for you very soon. So again, Fruugo are obliged to do product recalls for any dangerous or non-compliant products, and we are adding a product recall page to the website. And as the legal compliance department will also be proactively policing the platform and blocking any non-compliant products and disciplining retailers accordingly. So if you're found to be listing things without the relevant safety information or without the correct details, then we will have to suspend either the products and in some cases the retailers as well. Just to sort of summarize what we've discussed today, the new GPSR changes affect non-food products. So literally every product that we have on Fruugo will be required to submit this information. Even the supplements, as I mentioned earlier, we will be requiring manufacturer's details as well as all the relevant information to be submitted in terms of ingredients and labeling as needed. So yeah, the GPSR information will be still needed for the supplements in the relevant fields, not feeds. Okay, so yeah, obviously, just touching on that, they have food supplements and cosmetics and medical products have separate regulations. So you will be required to submit additional information for those categories. And then, so sellers need to appoint a responsible person for each of their products and update the information onto Fruugo by the 13th of December. As I mentioned, that should be available to more retailers tomorrow. We're just getting the email ready to send out to those. And if you're ready, do let me know and I'll add you to that next batch. And as I also mentioned, the legal and compliance team will be delisting any non-compliant products on the platform.
Awesome. Kelly, can I just add one thing on when you talk about responsible person back there? So I really, we've been looking after compliance of e-commerce and retailer products for multiple years now, and the general product category with other marketplaces for a similar amount of time. I really want to stress that of course it's mandatory, it has to happen, but it's really seek the right advice, because it won't be as tricky as you're probably anticipating, and the responsible person can cover multiple SKUs. This isn't about a sales pitch for Expandly. Far from it. However, we cover multiple SKUs and a responsible person. It's not a arduous nor a hugely costly exercise for you to do this for general products. And so if you are interested, then as a strong partner of Fruugo's, we'd be happy to help out and give you some free advice on this front.
Fantastic. And I know there's retailers here asking, will we communicate when the portal is open? Drop me an email tonight. I'll get back to you tomorrow. I can get you added to the functionality if you are ready to start uploading. We haven't rolled it out to everyone at this stage, but yeah, if you want access, then do let me know and I can get that sorted for you as soon as possible. So see if there's we've got 10 minutes left. Let's see if there's any other questions that we can pick up from here. To sum up, what is needed to be labeled on the products for every product sold, and what is needed online on the product page? Do you want to answer that one, Drew?
Sure. I mean, I can certainly answer to some degree the labeling element. The product page, probably one for you, Kelly, member of the team, but the labeling, I can't directly answer that because it differs hugely on product category and what the actual product is. However, the most basic form, you need to obviously educate the consumer on what the product is. You need to tell them how to use it, and you need to warn them of any risks involved with it or directions of use, including any ingredients, and the responsible person, of course. So those are like the key things. But of course, if you're talking about, higher risk products like, like cosmetics, of course, you need to go into the instructions and the do's and don'ts, the warning signs and where not to put it, not to digest it and stuff like that. There's certain symbols you need to have on there. If it's not designed for kids, you need to have the appropriate symbol for that. So there isn't a direct answer, unfortunately, but we can the label review, which will be required in order for you to be compliant, will cover that off.
So that's something you guys offer as well, isn't it, Drew, expandedly? Not only the responsible person, but also the product compliance and the checking of the listings and advising retailers what exactly is needed on their product inventory.
Yeah. So the product listing element of it, essentially, you need to follow the same guidance from the labeling requirement in your listings. For instance, and again, I'm using the most extreme form here. If you use, on your label, supports or removes lower back pain, yeah, it's a lumbar support, but it's not backed up with any scientific evidence, which would be required. If you use that statement, you can't use that statement. Okay, the purpose of it is to support it, you could change your terminology, but then that needs to be replicated on your listing. You can't say one thing on your label and then say something different on your listing, because of course you're misrepresenting the product.
Cool, thank you. So the responsible person and manufacturer contact info needs to be on the package as well as the CE mark. So that's correct, isn't it? It needs to be on the package and on the online listing as well.
Yep. So Fruugo's requirement is my understanding that you need to enter that information onto your listings, and yes, it needs to be visible on the packaging when the consumer receives it.
Cool. So one question, sorry, Drew, that I've gone past it now. They're all popping in, which is absolutely fantastic. And obviously we haven't had time to answer them all today, but we certainly will get back to you if we haven't been able to answer those. So we've got one here. We sell mostly clothing. To prevent delisting, do we need to submit just the responsible person details before December, or do we need compliance document for every product before this deadline? So on the Fruugo side, we will need the details submitting and the safety warnings and information to be submitted where applicable. On the documentation side, that's obviously the seller's responsibility to hold that. Is that correct?
Sorry, Kelly, repeat that. Sorry.
Yeah, so do they need to have that documentation there ready before December, or do they just need to submit the responsible person's details?
Well, in order to have a responsible person, part of the due diligence is to collect that document. So you can't have one with, you can have the document without a responsible person, but you can't instruct a responsible person without having a compliant label and a risk assessment.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Anything else that we want to pick up on before we finish?
I mean, I think we've covered up. The questions have been absolutely awesome. So thank you to everybody who's jumped in and asked them. And you know, Kelly and myself, with the support of Chris online, you know, we'll be able to answer any further questions you've got. Their emails are on the screen. Hope you've had an opportunity to take them down. So feel free just to, you know, build them up and fire them our way, and we'll be more than happy to give you answers to them. And as we've mentioned on there, so we can transcribe this if you wish, or you know, you can get a copy of it.
Yeah, and everyone will receive a recording as well, won't they, after the webinar ends? So they'll be emailed a copy of that. Will that come through tonight, Drew, or does that happen sort of tomorrow?
I'm not sure when it's expected to go out. Oh, tomorrow. Look, I've just been told in the chat tomorrow. Thank you. Tomorrow, Kelly.
Tomorrow, brilliant. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, unless there's anything else you wanted to talk about, Drew.
I don't think so.
No?
Been great. Thank you very much. Hopefully people have found it informative, and not, you know, try to keep it as straightforward as we can, whilst hopefully being educational. So more than happy to help out after that.
Okay.
Thanks,
And our
Kelly.
email addresses are here on the page. If anyone wants to reach out to us, then please get in contact with myself, or obviously the account management team directly are always available to help with any questions that you have.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.